Auburn landing Juju Lewis, the 5-star quarterback. It continues to get more real.
You are Locked On Auburn, your daily podcast on the Auburn Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On Auburn, your daily Auburn Tigers podcast. I'm your host, Zac Blackerby, and thank you so much for making Locked On Auburn your first listen every single day. It's Recruiting Thursday, so we are joined by Locked On recruiting expert, as well as Auburn recruiting writer for Auburn Daily. That is the Brian Smith. And recruiting coverage throughout the Locked On Podcast Network is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That's why LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. Check out linkedin.com/LockedOnCollege. Terms and conditions apply. Brian, you spent the weekend at a camp. You got to see Juju Lewis up close and personal. Your biggest takeaway from his performance was what?
He's Juju, consistently hitting the mark, making passes look pretty normal that really aren't. He was slow to start, but at the first third, 40% of it, he was as accurate as he normally is, and he just puts the ball where it needs to go, no matter the trajectory, the distance, whatever. That's why he's recruited by everybody. It's kind of uncanny. I'm used to seeing it from him, so it's almost boring to me, which is a good thing, because it's surprising when he doesn't hit the mark. So, and he got ticked off at himself a couple of times when he missed passes. He's super competitive. Yeah, but that's okay. I'd rather my guy be that way, especially at quarterback. It's kind of important. No but question. Yeah, he was really, really accurate, especially at the back half of the event. It was just like, this is what he does.
Right. So you spent time chatting with him a little bit. Did Auburn come up at all? And I'm sure there's no timeline or anything like that, but what did he say when you talked to him?
We talked more about his upcoming season, and believe it or not, he's not just a guy that's going to enroll a year early. He's going to enroll a year and a half early. I didn't know that until talking to him and listening to him talk to a couple other people. I've never seen somebody go a year and a half early. So he's going to be done in December with high school. So he's going to spend 2.5 years in high school and graduate. He said basically his class schedule is insane, and right now he has no life. So he goes to football practice, and then he's taking online, I'm sure, plus high school, because there's no other way he could do that. And I was like, holy cow, there's no way at that age I would have been able to, I would not have remotely been able to do that. So good for Juju. Yeah. But we stayed away from the recruiting stuff for the most part, but it's Auburn and SC. I talked to a couple other people. One of my buddies in the industry covers SC. He came all the way out from LA to cover Juju. And he said, the SC people think it's Auburn or SC. And I said, well, that's what the Auburn people think too on this end. So I didn't even ask Juju about it. He gets blasted all the time, but yeah, it's one of the two schools.
Yeah. And he would have said the same thing. It's like, there's no timetable. We'll see.
Oh, yeah,
but, I mean, currently, officially, he's committed to USC, but man, it's just the folks that have covered it. I mean, it really seems like Auburn is trending here.
Yeah, they have been for a while, and you don't keep having visits in homes and stuff like that will come later, but like just the unofficial on your own dime coming down, you don't do that unless you have an interest. And for those who don't know, he plays at Carrollton. It's in Georgia, just over the line on Interstate 20, and he's about 2 hours maybe from Auburn's campus. So it's a nice, comfortable drive. He'll be down, I'm sure, several more times, but I don't think he's worried about the timeline too much. And that's also one of the other things. Like Georgia's pretty much out of it. They're tired of waiting, which is good for Auburn's sake, obviously, because that's State U. But I just think that Auburn's the team to watch now, because I didn't hear anything about Alabama with him either while I was there. That kind of surprised me.
Yeah. So if there is no timeline, if you're Hugh Freeze, at what point do you say, okay, if we're going to do this, like we do need a timeline here?
That is the $1 million question. I spoke to a couple of people about that over the last week or so, and that's just subjective. I mean, 5-star kids pretty much get to do what they want. This is the one thing that drives coaches insane. If you tell him you have to have a timeline, you end up where Georgia's at, not in the race. So I don't really know what you do, but Auburn, I think they need a special player at quarterback to win titles. Georgia doesn't necessarily. That might be part of it, but Auburn is also rebuilding their roster And if you can get back-to-back quarterback classes with big-time guys, you got White last year, you change your program. So I guess you have a backup plan somewhere. You got to be talking to somebody else. You have to. But at the same time, I think you got to be in on him all the way through signing day at this point, because he's not afraid of a second quarterback in a class. I know that. So maybe you recruit somebody else. Maybe Mason Mims, who was there, was a great player. He's at Oxford. He's committed to Louisville. He was on fire. He was the best player at the event this past weekend. Okay. But I don't know. I think you stay all the way through with him because he can change your program.
It just seems like the recruitment that Hugh Freeze has kind of put his name on and said, this is important. This is going to be a signature win if we're able to do this. It's kind of like early on last cycle, it was Walker White. But then I think it almost turned into Perry Thompson and Cam Coleman, where it's like, we're getting these two guys. We're doing it. We're going to find a way to get either of these two guys, and they ended up getting them both. This, to me, feels like this year's version of that. Get Juju Lewis, get Julian Lewis at all costs. That's how I feel about it from the outside looking in, obviously, just based off of folks that I've talked to and how Hugh Freeze has approached it.
Well, I mean, there's probably a couple other guys kind of in that realm, but he's a quarterback. So that also adds to it. I mean, I knew who Juju was when he was in 7th grade. That's kind of unusual to say the least. Like, everybody knew he was that
And you
guy.
were in Florida at that time.
Yeah.
It's not like you were 2 hours away either. Yeah.
No. So I'm like, okay, this is a guy like in 7-on-7 and stuff. He'd play up or whatever and camps, everything. This is that kind of guy that can come in and compete with older players as an 18-year-old, give or take. And I know it's crazy because, like, he's not the biggest guy in the world. He's just barely 6 foot or so, 186 pounds. But you just can't teach his mobility and his ability to throw it on a dime. I mean, he's a special player. So if you can get that guy and change your program, like I said before, I'm all in on that idea.
Yeah. Also very interested to see if that happens. 2 things. One, what does it do to Auburn's 2025 class? I imagine it ramps it up a little bit because people will 100%. Say, oh, interesting. And then 2, I'm curious to see what it does to Auburn's like current quarterbacks. I mean, obviously after this year, Peyton Thorne will be gone, but what does it do to Hank Brown, Holden Geriner, Walker White, especially if Juju comes in and kind of shows, hey, he's capable of being a starter very early in his college career, which you think he's capable of that. I think he's capable of that. Everybody who's watched him thinks he's capable of that. So, yeah, I mean, when there's a player this big that commits, like, there are dominoes that fall. Like, this impacts a bunch of other things if Auburn is to pull this off.
Number one, I would start with receiver recruiting. There might be a kid that they're not even in the top 3 with right now, but everybody knows who Julian is. It's, if you make a phone call, you at least got a chance to get the kid on campus. I mean, hey, Julian's coming here. You're going to get the ball. You tell that to receivers, it usually opens their mind. And then number 2, if Julian comes in and he beats out guys that are older than him and they leave, oh, well. Sometimes it just is what it is, because about half to 2/3 of quarterbacks at any given school transfer anyway. So it's just, the goal here is just get the best guy on the field. And when, half your guys leave, you just recruit somebody else. Like, Julian's probably a 3-and-out guy. I would imagine you would recruit 2 quarterbacks in the class of 26. It just never ends. Mm-hmm. Nothing you can do about it.
Right. Okay. So I think an interesting defensive lineman that we need to be paying attention to for a future class. He stands out to me. Brian, you know him well. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on him. All that's coming up right here on Locked On Auburn. Today's show is brought to you by our friends at Monopoly Go. Yes, we all know that Monopoly Go is the best mobile game ever. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with friends for timed tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you can unlock, and there's so much to do and so much to get. And it's all interactive with your friends, family, listeners, if you guys play Monopoly Go. So just let us know. Check out Monopoly Go. It feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges, a ton of including their own unique mini games. So there's always something new every time you open the app. Monopoly Go, you can download it for free in your phone's app store. That's Google Play or the App Store. Game on with Monopoly Go. So yesterday, Coach L, who is he's a pretty well-known trainer up in the Birmingham area, and he does a lot of stuff with defensive linemen, a lot of stuff with Auburn's current defensive lineman, Bama's current defensive lineman, a lot of guys in the NFL as well. But he put out a picture of him and then Auburn defensive coordinator DJ Durkin, and Auburn defensive line coach Vontrell King Williams. And then like 2 seconds later, he put out a picture or a video of Vodney Cleveland, who is a 2026 defensive lineman out of Prattville that he was working out there. And I was surprised when I saw that he was a 2026 guy because he's huge. He's already 6'2", over 300 pounds. But then like the video he put up, Brian, is like, that dude does not look like he's concerned about moving 300 pounds because he was moving so smooth. But I mentioned Vodney Cleveland to you on a phone call earlier today, and you're like, oh, yeah, I know who he is. So tell me about him.
Power. He's a guy that is built like somebody that's 23, 24 years old already. He's been to Auburn here recently. I was on campus one day when he was there. When he walks by you, if you didn't know who he was, you'd say, okay, that's just one of the current defensive linemen. He's a sophomore in high school.
I mean, even his like, I'm looking at his headshot on his On3 page, and like he looks like a 24-year-old man.
100%.
It's insane.
Yeah. I mean, some people are just built differently is a fact in this case.
Sure.
So, he can move well though laterally, and he's not just a guy that's going to run over you. Like that's his number one thing is if you're off balance at all, you're going to go for a ride. But he can get around guys too. He's the rare interior guy that can rush the passer a little bit, and he's just learning technique and all that. But you can't teach the athleticism and the sheer girth that Vodney has. So right. I think he has a very, very bright future. He'll have offers from every school in the SEC.
Yeah, Auburn appears to be kind of one of the early favorites, it seems, for his services, and we'll see what happens and what his timeline is. He still has plenty of time. You know, some kids like to commit early on. Some people like to wait their time. That varies on the kid. You know that better than anybody. But as far as just this staff's approach to go ahead and like being on the front line of getting these guys for the 2026 class, that's just something Auburn really hasn't had before. And we've talked about it before, but like, this is what it looks like. Like we always kind of throw out the general idea of this staff gets recruiting, but they're already worried about 2026, and you know they've still got a big chunk of 2025 left. But to me, I just think that's valuable, and I think it's kind of an example that fans need to pay attention to as far as DJ Durkin and Vontrell King Williams already kind of hitting the trail and making sure they get some of their guys for 2026, which is still 2 years away.
Well, they had Anthony Tank Jones on campus already. He's arguably the best player in the country. St. Paul's and Mobile, another defensive lineman. They've had Hezekiah Harris from Huntsville, but Jemison, he's been on campus. They've done a really good job with their due diligence, especially locally, Georgia, Alabama kids, which they should, and bringing them over. You can't get them on campus enough times. It's something that's been going on for a long time at other programs. Like Saban used to offer kids that were ninth grade. People thought it was kind of crazy. He's like, well, certain kids you just know. Now, obviously, Saban can evaluate a little better than some people, but like I understand what he's talking about. And Auburn's done a good job with it. Like you see Anthony Tank Jones, you don't need any evaluation skills. He's kind of like Vodney. But it's a situation where if you get them on campus, you got to make hay, so you get them to come back. And some of these kids already been back multiple times, and they got 2 years of high school left. So Auburn is definitely trending in the right direction.
Yeah. I mean, the biggest knock against the hiring of Vontrell King Williams was he hasn't recruited and been a guy on the trail at the SEC level.
It's
and
true.
We haven't seen any of these guys pop yet, but I'm excited to see like what this could potentially turn into, because it appears that he's putting in the work, that he's going to see the people that he needs to see, and these defensive linemen are visiting Auburn as well. It's just, you know, it seems like he's a likable guy too, because everybody that's within the program loves the dude. So it seems like he's got all the traits of what a good recruiter would be, but I'm excited to see some of these pieces start to fall in place so we can kind of say, okay, Vontrell's starting to get into his bag a little bit.
He's a very nice guy. Everybody gets along with him in the recruiting media. He's somebody that you could just hang out with and have a beer and just talk football and be very comfortable. I'm not surprised he's having success as a recruiter. So he'll do just fine at Auburn. I mean, he's played big time football. He's coached it. He's been under some guys that knew what they were doing. He took the right path. and he's going to reap the benefits, and so will Auburn because of all those things.
Mm-hmm. No question. No question. So, yeah, Bodney Cleveland, a guy that is certainly on my radar on the defensive line. I think Auburn has just dominated this transfer portal window in multiple ways. Brian, we'll discuss that in just a moment right here on Locked On Auburn. Today's show brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Game Time is the best place to buy tickets, whether it's for an MLB game, an NBA game, an NFL game, a concert, and of course, college football, college basketball. They've got it all over at Game Time. They've got all sorts of things going on. You can save up to 60% off buying last-minute tickets for sports, concerts, comedy, the theater, and more. And you can save even more with the exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or event. And you can save even more when you choose a section and let Game Time choose the seats within that section that you want to buy. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege, all one word, LOCKEDONCollege, for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. Brian, something that's flying under the radar here, and it's boring. It's the boring side of the transfer portal, but it's probably the most important part of the transfer portal. In this age where tampering appears to be okay, technically illegal, but the loopholes are very big, and they haven't done anything to make those loopholes smaller. So we all know it's happening. But the fact that Auburn has held on to essentially all of their starters, if you want to count Jay Fair as a starter, you can. I don't know if he would have started this year, but he certainly was a starter last year. But they've held on to everybody. You hate seeing Colton Hood leave just because he is talented and he could be a guy that could fight for a starting spot next year, but you can deal with that then. But all in all, they've done an incredible job, especially when you look at other teams throughout the SEC, other teams throughout the state, and they just continue to lose people in the portal. I just think from your point of view, has Auburn just really dominated this transfer window?
For where they were at the end of the last season to now, I did not foresee this coming. I doubt even you did, and you followed Auburn your whole life.
Yeah.
I mean, I wrote that piece at Auburn Daily about Alabama losing just more and more players. I get the coaching change, but they've struggled. And to put it in perspective, On3's portal rankings doesn't have Alabama in the top 50. Not in the top 50. That's Auburn's in the top 10. So that just changes your perspective on the program. They address needs at D-line. They address needs with everything they've done, really. But I think getting Percy at left tackle, I mean, that's huge. So they got guys that were rare pieces that other schools wanted, and they got it pretty early. It's kind of boring right now because they got everything they pretty much needed. So it's kind of unique because usually you and I are like, man, I don't know what they're going to do about this spot or that spot. But Auburn's in a way better position than they were even at the end of spring practice, to be really honest.
Yeah. I mean, if you want to lump in both transfer portal windows, it's they got one of, if not the best left tackle that was available in either window in Percy Lewis. They got one of, if not the best pass rusher, especially when you kind of calculate for upside with Kieron Crawford. They've got the best wide receiver in the second portal window. And then we haven't even touched on the interior defensive lineman that they added. And I don't know if any of them are going to be all SEC, but they're certainly SEC caliber players. And you have depth to those positions now. So you can't really imagine it going much better than it did. And you held on to all of the guys that were in a very crowded cornerback and safety room, with the exception of Colton Hood, and the running backs. You kept all of these running backs from entering the portal. That's impressive. That's an impressive thing to do. And I think that's flying under the radar a little bit. As far as what to expect moving forward, it seems like Auburn will add a linebacker, and he visited Auburn yesterday. Khalil, who's from South Alabama. Auburn appears to be the favorite, but expected to visit Alabama and Missouri at some point this week. But also, it seems like they're interested in adding a defensive back or two now that the window is closed. They don't have to worry about people leaving or transferring out. But any kind of part of this roster where you're looking at it and saying they may need another guy or two at a certain position in your mind?
Well, DB is always something you look at because one guy goes out and it can really change your rotation. So I agree there.
Yeah.
You're never really completely out of the loop on D-line, but they've done so well. They might actually be. And then if there was some way to get a receiver, that's another story too. Even if it's some D3 guy that's a late bloomer, that whatever. Jared Verse went to Florida State from Albany. He ended up being the 19th pick in the draft. So
yeah,
there's weird things that happen. I just think that by and large, they already addressed most of their needs. I don't think there's anything that you can do about like the youth they're going to have at receiver. Most of their talented guys are going to be young. It is what it is. You're going to have to kind of battle through that. They do have good talent at tight end. The offensive line's much better than people know about. Now it's just kind of time to play. So the next portal window, I'm sure it'll be important again. But the good news is it's getting less and less important because the high school recruiting, Zach, to go along with it, has went up in a gigantuan way compared to the last staff, as your favorite guy, Mr. Potato Head.
Right.
But I think they're just in a good spot. Like they're trending to a point now where at one point I remember telling you like this is a 6-6 football team. Now I think they'll be 8-4. It's something like that. So defensive line depth is like paramount in the SEC. They went and got 3 guys. I didn't know if they'd get more than 1. They got 3.
Yeah, 3 solid guys. Where he's like, okay, yeah, like you don't have to talk yourself into it. It's like they've done it at other places. Like, yeah, okay, we can take that.
Yeah, I mean it's unbelievable how much the portal can help you if you plan it right, if you organize right, and you have good visits and good people on your staff. Good things happen to you, and Auburn is the beneficiary.
Yeah. Brian, you've got a ton of stuff going up every single day, all recruiting content at auburndaily.com. Be sure to check that out. Where else can people find everything you've got going on?
At FBScout_Florida. We're going to be having some fun with a lot of different things with the portal over the next few days, I have a feeling, because some of these kids, like where they're going, they announce it. I find it very curious, and I'll be tweeting about that, I'm sure.
Got it. Yes. Be sure to follow all of our stuff at auburndaily.com. Please like the video. Please subscribe to the channel. We'll see you tomorrow. This has been Locked On Auburn.